Welcome everyone to Navigating the Future of Board Exams. I'm Jake Goodman. I'm a psychiatry resident doctor. We've got two other co-hosts here. We will introduce ourselves in a second. I want to give everyone the opportunity to join in. Some people are probably getting water, going to the bathroom, whatever. Take your time. We'll start in about a minute. In the meantime, maybe throw in the chat where you are located and maybe what, if you're a pre-med medical student, where you are in your journey. And that way we'll get to know each other a little bit. All right, so this is brought to you by Cram Fighter. We'll get into Cram Fighter in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm Jake Goodman. I went to medical school in Jefferson, up in Philadelphia. I got my MBA in between my third and fourth year of medical school down at the University of Georgia, and I'm now in my psychiatry residency down at the University of Miami. I'm going to go and let Fred introduce himself now.
Evening, everybody. My name is Fred Bertino. I am an interventional radiologist in Atlanta, Georgia, and I've been doing medical education forever. Some of you, if you've ever tuned into MST webinars, probably know my face. I am so happy to be joined by an all-star team here. Jake and Lana, I am so excited to work with you tonight, and we're going to cover so much information. Lana, why don't you introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, my name is Lana. I am from Virginia College of Osteopathic Medicine at the Carolinas campus. I'm a second-year student, just like a lot of you, and I'm really excited to start this.
Perfect. So we've got a medical student, a physician, a attending, and a resident here, right? So we've got really all different levels, and we can really answer a lot of your questions and tell you guys, give you guys as much advice, insight that we have. So let's get into it. I'm going to end this poll. Okay. Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. Failed to share poll. The poll kind of messed me up. All right, hold on. Let me share. Okay. All right, I need to get out of this poll. Sorry, guys. Something is. Fred, Lana, can you see, what are you seeing right now?
I've got your desktop on there, Jake, but how about this? Allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, that works.
And I am happy to take over there. We may have to discontinue polls for the
evening, the poll, yeah, as soon as I clicked on share results, it just knocked me out of the screen. So lesson learned there.
1 second for me.
I'm going to stop sharing. You should be able to share now.
Yep, 1 moment.
Okay. Sorry, y'all. We'll be back in 1 second here. All right, perfect.
All right. Sorry, 1 second here.
Okay, so looks like for whatever reason, I'm now controlling this. Sorry about all that, y'all. We're still learning Zoom and all this stuff. Despite the fact we've been doing this for years, it's always still difficult. So here's what we're going to cover tonight. Okay.
You all see my screen here?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, let's go for it, Jake.
All right, so what we will cover tonight. As many of you know, step 1 is becoming pass-fail. And we're going to talk about what that means. How to stand out for residency matching. I can talk about this as I just couples matched too. I matched in my #1 program, and we'll talk about what to do in medical school to separate you from the pack. We'll talk about meeting the new Cram Fighter and how to utilize that for your board exams, and then how to stay balanced mentally and physically. Medical school is demanding, exhausting, brutal. I know, I've been there. Fred's been there, Lana's in it, and residency is also very demanding. And we're going to talk about how we stay balanced mentally and physically. and then we're going to do a Q&A. So if you have questions throughout this webinar, throw it in the chat. If we can't answer it during, we'll answer it during the Q&A. We'll scroll and see those questions then.
All right, so we'll start by talking about some of the changes that a lot of you are probably anticipating about step one and how we're getting there. And the scoring system is essentially changing to a pass-fail system. That might be quite exciting for many of you, and at the same time, it may still raise a lot of questions for you. What does this ultimately mean? Well, realize that step one is still going to be important for program directors. And because the outcome is essentially binary, it basically means that you have to prove to them that you are capable of studying and passing a medical board exam. Remember that something that we've always preached for as long as I can remember, and certainly still holds true as somebody who's been not only through the application process, but also who has interviewed residents for when it comes to residency. What the step one really shows program directors is not how great of a doctor you're going to be. We all know that that doesn't correlate. But what does correlate is the fact that if you are likely to prepare adequately and pass a standardized medical test, it gives the program director insurance that you will pass your subspecialty boards at the end of your residency training. So please keep that in the back of your mind as you prepare for this. Realize that you are showing them that you have what it takes to simply pass a multiple choice question exam. All the more reason not to kind of write this off, even though it may be a little bit of a or I should say a less intense grading scheme. I would not pass this opportunity to really put your best foot forward. And arguably the number one reason to do that is because step two is still graded. If you don't really have the strategies to go into step one and knowing how to prepare for it with that abundance of information, how do you expect to sit down and really master the material for step two if it's so abundant? So use this as a stepping stone to really take in a lot of details, understand how those details have to interplay to the concepts, and you will be very much set up for success when it comes to step two. Your length of the dedicated study period now may be a bit shorter. Historically, we used to have an old adage that said 2 months for step one, 2 weeks for step two, and a number 2 pencil for step three. This is back to when these exams were still in Scantron, which even though I'm kind of old, I'm not that old to have taken written exams. So realize that your dedicated study period may be allowed to be a bit shorter this time around, but the intensity and the quality that you want to put into your preparation is still there. And when it comes to resources, which we'll certainly touch on a little later, I would argue that the resources to prepare for step one have certainly not changed. And I'm going to go a little bit more into the strategy with Jake a little bit later. But something that I did want to ask is we have the benefit of having Lana here, who's currently in the thick of medical school. And I'm really curious to know, Lana, what are some of your anxieties as you get ready as a second-year medical student to prepare for these exams for the first time?
Sure, it's the whole new change is very terrifying because you don't have as much. You have one chance, I guess, to put a number to what you're capable of, and at the same time, you want to focus on other things to be a standout applicant, not just the boards. There's other things that they look at, and so it is very anxiety provoking. But using this for me is a game changer, and it helped me have a good time management in medical school, definitely.
Absolutely. Jake, what do you think about some of these changes to the grading scheme of step one? I mean, somebody who's just kind of come off of this has gotten a numeric score. And now very shortly after that, you're in your first year of training, and just a few years before that, you took this and now it's undergoing a major change. What are your feelings about something like this?
I'm excited for all y'all. Like step one is horrible. It's a horrible test. And I mean, not horrible in the sense like it's for a reason. But people were so stressed about this thing, me included. I mean, to the point where we were analyzing our score. Like, if we don't get a blank, we will not be able to, continue into orthopedic or plastics or whatever, a million different specialties. Now, you can argue that still exists with step two, and you're probably right. There's still a component of that, but it decreases the stress a little bit, in my opinion, because it gives you kind of an opportunity to, without the stress of, I need to get a 2, 20, 30, 40, whatever, you just get your study schedule right. You learn as much as you can. You hit the high yield stuff. You don't go in the nitty gritty page 342 of first aid, some little crap in the corner that I like memorized that didn't help me at all. You just get the bases, you get most high yield stuff, and then you go into step two where your score really matters and you crush it. But don't write this off. Don't just half-ass this thing, because how you study on step one is going to predict how you do on step two.
Totally agree. And we're going to get into some of the details about what that actually entails so that you guys can put your best foot forward for both exams. So hang tight. We're going to get there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Jake, what do you think, some of these changes, we know that there's going to be an increase in the passing benchmark. I know for a fact that it goes from basically the equivalent of a 194 to a 196 to be passing. Do you think that this change is negligible, or do you think it's all that significant?
I don't think it's that significant. I think anyone, y'all, if you put in the work, you're going to pass this thing. You're going to pass this thing. A 196 to 194, it doesn't matter. You're going to get a 2 blank. It's going to end up being a pass. The people that don't pass this thing, it happens. But they may not have their schedule right. They may have not put in the work the year or two in advance to really prepare for this thing. All of you are here. You're very dedicated to learning. That shows because you're coming to an event like this. You're very serious about your studying. You're going to pass this thing. You just do not want to sleep on this. And it's interesting here with the timing, because this is different. And I'm going to let Fred speak about this, because step 2 CK is the heavy hitter now. And you have to strategize when you're going to take this thing compared to step 2 CK. And before I let Fred take that, I'll just say, I feel like I could have passed step 2 CK right after I took step 1. It wouldn't have been pretty, but I could have passed it because I learned so much on step 1 that was actually used in step 2. That's why it's so important to learn the material for step 1.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to step 2 CK, another question on everybody's minds is that based on their medical school curriculum, a lot of schools now are encouraging the students to take step 1 after their first, or I should say their clinical rotation year. So basically after year 3, many of these students, based on their school's curriculum, are then taking the basic science exam. Regardless of how your school schedules your curriculum, I don't want anybody to have any anxiety and think that one is an advantage over another one. Realize that, however, that the difficulty comes in the fact that if you do a year of clinical rotations, you might be a bit more removed from the basic science fundamentals that are going to be tested on step 1. So it may require a little bit more of a dedicated study period to bring your mindset back to where you were in the first 2 years of medical school. Is it impossible? Certainly not. Tons of doctors have done this. They've done exceptionally well. And now that the exam is pass-fail, it is actually a bit more advantageous for those medical students who are taking it after their 3rd year rather than 2nd year to do just as well as their post-2nd year counterparts. Something else you want to consider as well is the best way to judge your readiness to pass the exam. This is going to be based upon your experience when it comes to preparing for tests in the past. Think about what it was like to study for the MCAT. Think about what it was like to study for some of your undergraduate exams. Think about what it really is like to study for some of your medical school exams or your finals or midterms or however they're broken up. You know how you learn the best. And it's something that we constantly say on the MST division of what we do, is that you really want to learn how you learn, especially as you're getting ready to gear up for your dedicated study sessions or dedicated study period. You are the best judge and determinant of how you are going to take in all of this information in a timely fashion, because you know what has worked for you and you know what has been very successful. Trust that instinct. Trust what has made you successful during your studying, during your normal curriculum period. The same recipe should work quite well for your dedicated study period. As we move along as well, we think about test prep pointers and how we should really allocate our resources. Lana, question for you. You're about to take these exams as it comes up. You've probably been inundated with a ton of different recommendations of different resources to use. There's a ton of anxiety surrounding them. I remember when I was in medical school, it was a very common thing and became a meme and something that we would quite often make fun of. But essentially, you've probably, and all of you out there probably have friends who walk around with a specific type of resource and say, I'm sorry, but if you're not using this resource, you're going to fail. And like, those are the worst people in the history of the world. But we all have people or went to school with people who are like that. So like, Lana, what kinds of things have you heard regarding this? What are the rumors that are surrounding it in the current day and age? And what can I do to try to debunk that? And I'd be curious to hear what Jake has to say as well.
So I would say networking is key, because there's different people that suggested different resources, and I just made friends with different people, and they kind of passed down some of their information to let me try these different things. And from that point, I got to decide what I liked. And once I found that I liked a certain resource that worked for me personally, then I went on and I purchased it. And likewise, many of these resources will allow you to have like a week free trial too. So you don't have to commit to something just because someone said that this is the one. This is going to be unpopular opinion here, but personally, I'm not a reader of a first aid. I use Anki, which is kind of has like the quotes from first aid, and that works for me better than reading the book. It's more engaging, but everyone's different. And just because someone suggests to read, every day you must read 5 pages of first aid, doesn't mean that that will work for you. And just, you have to try to understand what you like.
I think you have to find your resource. Like sketchy, I will go to bat for, like, and die for. Like sketchy, I passed step 1 because of sketchy. This is not an endorsement for sketchy, but use my code Jake Goodman 425 for 10% off. I'm just kidding. I don't have that code yet. Anyways, sketchy is what got me through. Sketchy micro, sketchy path, sketchy farm. And then I utilized like 2 more resources that were like my secondary resources. Like, of course, first aid I used, and UWorld I used, but I found Pathoma to kind of fill in the gaps that sketchy didn't cover. And I was a little late to the game, but Boards and Beyond, I started using towards the end, and that was really effective. So find your resources. 3, could be 4, could be 2. But when you start getting 6, 7, I mean, you're spreading yourself too thin. And when it comes down to like game time, like you have 6 weeks to study for this thing, or 8 weeks, or whatever your dedicated period is, you don't have time to be investing in new resources. You only have time to be going over what's worked for you over the last year or 2 in medical school. And then the other thing I want to say regarding this slide, now that this is pass fail, just keep in mind the high yield stuff, guys. Don't go into the nitty gritty, like the smallest, like the 15th side effect of Depakote. Just get the big 5, right? Like learn your mnemonics and acronyms and cover the bases, but don't get caught in the nitty gritty. That if you do that, it might as well not be pass fail. If you're really trying to get a 255 on this thing when it's pass fail, you're shooting yourself in the foot. I would just go for the best score you can, even though it's pass fail, just do the best you can. And then when you get all the high yield topics, then in step 2, you can get into the little bit more nitty gritty when it really counts.
Absolutely. Go for it, Lana.
Sorry if I may add real quick. I kind of started with the pessimistic note of saying how, pass fail is a little bit scary, but at the same time, what I've noticed that it changed my directive on how I view this test, the first test, because to me, I'm not just studying to pass. I study to be a good physician so that when I go into my clinical rotations, I can be ready, to take care of those patients. I'll have an idea and to be able to diagnose these different diseases and things just because I've paid attention. I'm invested into more than just a score, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, that's really great insight. And I think it's sometimes really important to understand what the bigger picture of all of these things are. The idea is to try to become very knowledgeable so that you don't have to constantly Google something, especially when it's considered fundamental knowledge. So consider this experience as an understanding of the fundamentals, the absolute bare minimum of what you must understand to competently practice medicine. Now, granted, you may ask, does it really matter if I know all the rate limiting enzymes of various biochemical metabolic pathways? And the answer is probably no, unless you go into pediatrics. But what I will say, for the majority of things, you will do just fine if you put the time in, you focus on the high yield information, as both Jake and Lana said, and you don't overstudy the topic. You are aware of your time efficiency. You can demonstrate a proficiency in it, and you can move on. And I think the overlying concept here is use the resources that have worked for you in the past. Don't listen to the people who stress you out. Do not consider all of your friends to be advertisers for different things. Many of them are probably very meaning well, but at the same time, they sell you snake oil because it doesn't quite work for you. So keep that in mind. Now, UWorld comes back all of the time when it comes to talking about resources. And something that I have been pushing for probably close to 10 years now is the fact that UWorld is most certainly a learning tool. It is not an assessment tool. And some of you looking at the slide right now are probably thinking to yourselves, like, Fred, you're insane. This is ridiculous. It literally gives you scores at the end of every quiz that you do. And while that's true, I've often equated UWorld to not being a test apparatus, but more of a textbook. UWorld contains everything that you would ever possibly have to know, and really hammers incredible concepts when it comes to studying for the USMLE and the COMLEX exams. It's comprehensive. It will cover everything that you need to feel very confident to pass the exam. And doing UWorld with depth, in other words, getting through it, really understanding the explanations to the questions, taking great notes on what I like to call light bulb moments that really connect the dots for you, is a far better use of your time than trying to spread yourself out over multiple question banks. Many people ask me, what if I finish UWorld once? Should I start Kaplan, or should I do some other Q bank or something different like that? I say maybe go through it again, or really hit the questions that you didn't get right, or the ones that you flagged, to really make sure that you understand it. UWorld's been around for a long time. Again, we don't get any endorsements from these people, and I feel like we always should ask for them, but we don't. We do this because we have experience in this, and that we all trust these resources because they've worked for us, and they've worked for the dozens, and arguably, I don't even know, Faith, I got to ask you at some point how many students I've taught or tutored over the years, but arguably a couple hundred students. It's worked. I mean, the tradition is very much alive and real. So, understand that you want to cover a tremendous amount of breadth in the subjects that exist, but you don't need to do that with the number of resources. You can go quite deep and quite knowledgeable with very few. Minimalism is the key here. Jake and Lana, anything to add here?
No, UWorld is, if you had one resource and you were going to a stranded island, it's UWorld.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely the highest yield Q bank. It's definitely saved me in tons of times. Going through these questions over and over again and really taking your time to master them is all you need. And I want to echo this, is that one question bank known quite well is far better than dabbling in a couple of different kinds of things like Amboss and Kaplan and UWorld. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you don't necessarily like UWorld and you just wanted to use Amboss, or you just wanted to use Kaplan or something like that, doing one with extreme depth is far better than spreading yourself too thin. And when we talk about UWorld being the textbook, really using it not to perseverate over scores, because it's pass fail now. So what do I need to worry about a score? UWorld can at least tell you trends, general big picture concepts of how you're doing, but at the same time, you really want it for the explanation, because I described it as a textbook earlier. Well, if UWorld is the textbook, then I have to almost call the first aid book the syllabus for step one. If you've ever opened the book, it is bullet points, it is random facts. It is not necessarily a novel that is easy to read, but it's a collection or a compendium of various topics that is the highest yield material throughout all of medical knowledge, at least for step one. Some history of this. This book came out in 1990, so it's going to be 32 years old this year. This is the first real organized resource that ever existed for step one. Back in the 90s, it was far, far smaller. I promise you I didn't take step in the 90s. I'm not that old, but it was a lot shorter. Now it has grown to probably close to 700 pages and covering so many different pieces of material. And I want you all to think about that in terms of just how old this is. This resource has been such a prominent factor in the training of so many doctors in the last 30 plus years that every resource to study for step one that has followed has all become derivative of the material in first aid. So I can say with absolute certainty that if you wanted something comprehensive to know everything on that exam, I guarantee you that it is in that book. I guarantee you. I imagine Jake would agree with me. I'm sure he's probably looked at first aid alongside some of the other resources. Jake, what kind of commentary do you have on this book?
Yeah, like I only have 2 resources for step 3. I'm about to take step 3. And, here it is, right? So first aid, and then I've got UWorld. If I minimize my screen, I've got UWorld right there. First, the way that I studied for step 1 and step 2, when it came down to sort of like a more dedicated time or closer to the test, actually even before that too, I would do UWorld questions. I would do, and someone asked earlier, timed versus untimed. As many people will tell you different things. I say when you first start, untimed, get in, just get into the questions. You don't have to like be trying to do a minute and a half when you first start. Like just learn how the questions are worded and stuff like that. When you get a little bit closer to like grind time, study time, and the test is approaching, then you get into time. That's my opinion. We could talk about that in a little bit. But the way that I would do UWorld is I would go through questions, and when I got it wrong, I would need to find where that information was. Well, even if I got it right, I would need to find where that information was, either in first aid or in my other resources, so sketchy or pathoma. I'm like, oh, I remember that. Let me just check that sketchy, strep pneumo. Oh yeah, right here, I see blank, blank, blank. Okay, got it, move on. That's how I used UWorld. And I think and I kind of used this path here. I had already kind of used one throughout. And when it came down to two, and I used three throughout, when it came down to two to do those questions, I would take from one, which is first aid, and take from three, which is, pathoma and all those other things. And UWorld was kind of like the Bible, and everything else was was originating from it.
Absolutely. So now it's probably raising a lot of heads because we've just been saying to keep things kind of minimal and not really have like a ton of resources. And I'm showing you a picture of first aid. I'm showing you a picture of UWorld. Then I'm showing you 4 different icons in that third column there. That might feel a little overwhelming. Like, how am I supposed to get through all of this information in the span of about 8 weeks to study for this test? And the trick here is that you're not. Okay. I think you really got to consider, if you're going to take a final exam, like in one of your college courses, realize that the syllabus is the overlay. It's the outline that will give you every possible topic that can be tested on that final exam. So it is your prerogative, therefore, to know the syllabus and the material in that syllabus inside and out. If you wanted to use first aid, even as minimal as possible, the question that always comes up, do I need to know this piece of information? And if you can find it in first aid, the answer is yes. UWorld then is the textbook. It has all of the different things that you could possibly need. And then we go into the third column here, which is an Anki icon, a Boards and Beyond icon, a BRS physiology, and a pathoma book, among probably a bunch of other ones. Sketchy, for example, all of these other resources. How do you use them? The answer is sparingly. The answer is when you need more context. The answer is when you need to elaborate on something that first aid didn't quite tell you everything you needed to. And yet UWorld is suggesting that maybe I don't quite have this concept down because I get maybe 50% of these questions right about Graves' disease, for example, and about 50% of them wrong. Maybe I don't fully understand what I need to be talking about. Well, if that's the case, you grab a copy of Satara off your bookshelf, you open that up, and you go specifically to the area on Graves' disease and read about the things that you weren't sure about. I'm not saying you have to read anything in column 3 cover to cover. I'm saying it should exist on your bookshelf so that you can take it off for a little bit more elaboration when you need it the most. Jake, what do you think about this?
Agreed. Yeah. If you get lost in like trying to memorize pathoma, and you lose sight of the main resources, and pathoma may be your main resource. I don't mean to say anything poor about that. These are supplemental resources that provide you with the little pieces you need to fill in the gaps. Focus on the big ones.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Lana, organizing your resources in your head right now as you're approaching this, how is this sounding? Is this sounding congruent to the things you've heard in the past, or is it sounding totally dissonant from things that you've heard in the past?
Definitely sounds congruent to what I've heard in the past, especially since for my school, I've organized a few webinars with 3rd and 4th years who are in this honor society and scored particularly well on the exam. And this is exactly what they've been telling me as well.
Fantastic. We're noticing some amazing questions that are coming in through the chat here. Keep them coming. We're going to do a live Q&A at the end if we don't get to answering your question in our chat here, but definitely keep them coming in. We are not ignoring them, we promise you. So Jake, you're a little bit more connected to this in temporality. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how do you think this is going to impact residency? And then Lana as well, where you are coming into this application process, being arguably like the first generation of people who will enter into residency with a pass-fail score. You guys are actually going to be more of the experts on this than I am at this point. So I want you guys to take over and tell me what you think about your impressions here.
Yeah. I'll start. So overall, I think this is positive for people that are not geniuses. I am not a genius. I took the MCAT twice. My story is, I got denied by 25 med schools before I finally got in. It was a long journey for me. I was never the smartest dude, but I always worked so freaking hard. And for me, I'm not a natural test taker. I don't crush these things. I have to really work. And many of you may be the same way. So if it's you versus somebody else to get in the residency and they were the ones that got a 260 on step one, and I could study for 20 years and I would still never get a 260 on step one. I can't do it. I'm a smart guy, but I'm not that, that's next level. And so it took out that from the equation. It doesn't matter how much you crush step one. I think it gives more opportunity for people that excel in other areas to compete, whether that's research, whether that's life experience, whether you did something in medical school that's very unique. It also allows your clerkship grades to be accounted for more. I was a better third and fourth year med student than I was first and second year because I'm good at talking to people, and I'm good at talking to patients, and I can relate to people, and I'm a hard worker. I'm better at reading people than reading a book. And so I would have loved to have this pass fail because I'm better at the clerkship stuff. I'm better at the step two, more like patient knowledge stuff, less like stupid biochemical pathway that you're never going to actually use. So I think overall, it's going to make more well-rounded candidates succeed and excel, and the genius bookworms maybe will have to figure out a way to compete. That's my view on it.
Yeah, kind of going off the same line as Jake here. I feel the same way. I think it's an opportunity for us to branch out for all of med students, and actually gives us takes off the stress of having a score. You have to pass and still study hard to be good at clinical years, but it gives me more time to focus on other things like research projects. Like I'm in clinical trial. I have time now to do that. I'm creating an app and having a plan of how to study. As long as you go with that plan, knowing that you give it everything you got, you don't have to score in 99th percentile. You can still be a good, well-prepared student for your clinicals and still accomplish other things at this level while you have a little bit more free time.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I agree. I do think that shifting to a pass-fail step one is certainly going to lighten the load a little bit when it comes to the emphasis needed on it. But realize also that, as we said before, the skills needed to adequately prepare for step one translate into step two, as well as translate into your passing of your medical boards. All of those kinds of things are talents that you will develop by preparing for this. Realize, however, that as Jake and Lana said, that clerkship grades and the emphasis on how you maintain your reputation in a hospital setting, that feedback that you're going to get from your attending supervisors are really going to come into play here. And they've been historically a very large impact in what brings people to the next step, which is residency. As somebody who has interviewed people in this before, many of the most important aspects of a residence application was not necessarily their step one score, but their letters of recommendation. So keep that in mind as you go forward when it comes to applying for residency and preparing for step two. When it comes to studying for step two CK pointers, realize that UWorld doesn't really go away here. The Q bank for the step two is excellent, absolutely excellent. In fact, quite comparable to what excellent preparation you can expect from it for step one. You will find step two to be a much more interesting, a much more fun test, a much more enjoyable test to take. It really does test clinical knowledge. It's asking what is the next step in management of patients or next step in diagnosing things. And it really does put you into the helm of figuring out how you want to be a doctor and how to make these decisions. As Jake said, most of the knowledge from step one is translatable to what you would need to know in step two, because there is a larger emphasis on pathophysiology, explaining why certain symptoms are happening, explaining why patients are presenting in the way that they are. So adequate preparation for step one generally correlates with excellent preparation and results on CK. You won't need as much dedicated study time for step 2, and that's because you will have learned a tremendous amount of the material during your clinical rotations, as Jake had said earlier. You also won't need that much time, and thankfully you won't have that much time either. It's going to be a bit more of a cram session, but you should feel more prepared. What I will say, though, is that some of the best preparation you can do for step 2 CK earlier is really put effort into those shelf exams that you take at the end of your clinical rotations. Those questions that come out from the NBME question writer essentially repeat themselves in many ways on the actual step 2 CK, because there's only a certain amount of ways they can ask about placenta previa, and there's only a certain amount of ways they can ask about a myocardial infarction, and there's only certainly a certain amount of ways that they can ask about Graves' disease. So consider the fact that studying for your shelf exams adequately, preparing for each rotation as if it were a mini step 2 CK, is going to poise all of you in an excellent position of success. It's going to set you up for a phenomenal score on step 2 CK and allow you to set yourself apart. I'd have to disagree a little bit with the groups, I think, that Jake had brought up earlier when it comes to people who might be super brainiac geniuses and not. I think everybody really has the potential to do this, because I don't think it really requires a super high level of intelligence to do what it is that we do. I think it just requires a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication. And I think that all of you have the capability of doing this, not necessarily with natural intelligence, but I mean, we all have a little bit of that, but more a way of preparing intelligently rather than being intelligent. So I want to encourage all of you to consider that. Jake, I know exactly where you're coming from, because I used to worry about this all the time. And the more that I've seen my colleagues in medicine, sometimes I wonder exactly how big the brains are on these people. I joke, but all of you have what it takes to do phenomenally well on these exams. It just requires not intelligence, but intelligent preparation for what you're about to do. Moving forward here.
I just want to add one quick point there. Something that no one ever talks about that I think is so critical for step 2 CK, and not everyone's going to have this opportunity. If you can finesse a way to sort of create a dedicated before step 2 CK, if your medical school does not provide you with a dedicated before step 2 CK, you need to find a way to create one. So for me, I when I was doing my schedule, I took some very easy class right before CK, some rotation that was like half online or something like that. And I essentially created a dedicated period for me. Not everyone's going to have that opportunity. You might be stuck with surgery right before you take CK, and you can't do much about that. But if you can finesse and try to figure out a way to create a dedicated, so you can have even 2 weeks for whatever it is, a little bit of time to do a 40 block, because you're not going to be able to do 40 blocks when you're on surgery. Forget about it unless you don't want to sleep. So try to figure out a way to kind of create a little dedicated before CK if you can.
Really good pointer.
I know I'm not there yet, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to add, and it's okay if you are not able to create that time, but just approaching every profession and every field with passion, and going home and maybe reading about what you saw will really help you excel and help you with memorization, because it's a lot different than, like Jake said, it's a lot different than looking at books. You will be seeing patients, and you can actually, it's a different type of memory. It's a lot of things going into play, and so it'll help you remember.
So Jake, as a current resident in this situation, somebody, one who is in the middle level here, somebody who answers to attendings, but also has the responsibility of coaching medical students. What do you think are the most valid points for acing your clerkships and doing really well in that regard?
Yeah, I think if you can show up on time, you're friendly to everybody, nurses, techs, attendings, residents, everybody, other medical students. You care, you actually care. You're asking questions. You ask questions and you want to learn, and you want to learn so that when you're a resident, you can know the answers and you can treat the patient, and you're genuinely interested. If you just do that, if you just show up every day and do that, you're going to pass every single rotation. In fact, you might honor every single rotation. That right there is like 90% of the puzzle. The other 10% is like really making sure that you go above and beyond, you prepare presentations, you are very knowledgeable about all your patients. That will be really separates the pack from the people that get the highest grades. But I think like so many people sleep on the fact that if you just show up and you're nice and you care about people and you're a friend, to think about it like this. It's a lot harder to give a friend a bad grade, right? If a med student comes in and they become my friend and they're cool and they're great with patients, how am I going to give them a bad grade? It's like, it's hard for me to do that. That was my strategy as a med student, to become friends with everybody. And then, learn as much as you can. Obviously, learn the little nitty gritty about surgery and OBGYN and appear interested. The worst thing you could do is come in and say, well, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon, so I really don't care at all about pediatrics. You're going to fail every rotation.
Lana, what do you think some of the misconceptions are from a basic science student standpoint about going into clinical rotations?
I think one of the common ones is just you're not expected to know everything. And I think a lot of us think that we have to be perfect on clinical rotations, and that if we can't answer one of the questions that we're pimped on, then that's just the end. We're gonna get a bad grade. No, I think that attendings I think it's our preceptors, they understand that we're still little babies. They're just trying to be good doctors eventually. They understand that, and don't take it to heart if you are, if you make a mistake. They understand that. So just keep doing
I
your
think
best.
that's actually quite insightful. I think what has happened over the past several years when it comes to medical education, and maybe a lot of you, this may resonate, but we spend so much time what we do studying the things that it is that we study. And if you're at the level where you're rotating in a hospital or being a resident or even on an attending level, there's a really good chance that you have kind of fused or associated the work that you do with who you are as a person. And when you find in moments where you are wrong or you have failed to do something, you therefore have become a bad person in that way, shape, or form. And this kind of psychology eventually leads to you thinking that I should probably stop putting myself in positions where I could make mistakes because I don't like this feeling. And that's a terrible pit to fall into. I tell my residents that it is so important to embrace the wrongness, just revel in it, love it, be wrong all the time, as often as you possibly can. Because if you're wrong, number one, you'll learn something. And number two, you will have like that little, psychological, emotional trauma that, you don't like how it feels, and you'll never forget the thing that you were wrong about. And you should totally embrace that. Like, don't ever give up that willingness to just roll around and love the wrongness that is associated with being a trainee in this process at any level. Be optimistic about it. I'm wrong all the time, but I learn a ton. So I think that's super important. And something that I'll leave you guys with as you enter your clerkships or you get to that level is like, when it comes to medical training, especially in the wards, people are looking for the 3 A's. They're looking for affable people, they're looking for available people, and then they're looking for able people. And they're looking for those 3 A's in that order exactly. Affability, availability, and then ability, in that order. So do not be afraid if you don't know everything up front. But if you are fun to work with and you are present, you're going to do great. So other things that you might be able to do, explore specialties early. Okay, jump in there, rotate in as many possible things as you can. Hopefully, if you have the opportunity to do various other subspecialties that you may not see, interventional radiology, before you apply, that may not be advertised as often in medical school. It gives you an idea of different things that you can apply for and really put your foot forward and start getting really interesting projects. So you might find some passion projects in some of these lesser known specialties. So put yourself out there, be in the hospital. Yes, walk down to radiology. Yes, talk to the volunteer for your team to talk about that CT scan. You never really know what you're going to find down there. Yes, I want to look at the microscope with the pathologist for 20 minutes. That could be kind of cool for you. I mean, it wasn't for me. I couldn't do that. But I mean, if you go and volunteer your time and jump into those situations, you'll never know the things that you could potentially be loving and missing at the same time. And it also opens opportunities for letters of recommendation. It might inspire a personal statement, and you can get involved in volunteer or research initiatives with a department that otherwise are completely separate from the rotation you're currently on. Jake and Lana, what are your thoughts on this?
I completely agree. Now I'm kind of doing this mini shadowing mini rotation with the neurosurgery group in South Carolina, and we were just in the OR, and this is literally a few days ago, and this anesthesiologist walked in and they were about to intubate. He's like, "You want to learn?" I'm like, "Yeah." Come here, and just like kind of explained a lot of things to me and gave me a lot of attention. He's a great teacher. I wish they had a residency program there, but they don't. But just things like that. Be open-minded. Just because I'm interested in one specialty doesn't mean that I wouldn't go and talk to other specialties and like see what they're doing and how things are, how things work. Because it does tie into my boards eventually too. So it's all connected.
Yeah. And
What
I
about you,
think,
Jake? How'd you figure out you wanted to do what you do?
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I never thought I would do psychiatry in a million years. I just I did the rotation. I was like, this is awesome. I'm really passionate about this. And I think more and more you start to realize what you want in life, and lifestyle became very important to me. I saw what some of the other specialties life was like, and I decided that there were only a few specialties that I would be willing to do. Because I want to have a certain type of lifestyle, in the sense that, surgery is not for me. I can't stand for that many hours. I have a bad back. I don't want to be in the hospital, really, period. Which is a realization I had in like third year of med school. It's like, I don't really like the hospital. I constantly want to go to that outpatient office to go like sit with the patient. And so like any specialty where I have to like really work in the hospital for most of the day is not anything I want to do. And that's an important, you learn that as you go throughout medical school. I just wanted to add a point here that I know probably many of you were sitting here like we're going over these things, letters of rec, personal statement, research. And it's like, how do you have the time to do all this stuff? And I remember thinking the same thing. If med school was just studying and boards, it would still be so hard and so demanding. It's so hard to find those extra hours to do these things. And, you end up burning yourself out if you try to do it all. So I hope that we don't come across as like, you got to do all these things. Of course, you have to get letters of recommendation and personal statement, but like, you don't need all these things. You don't need research. I actually didn't really have any research. Now, I mean, I'm not going to say for specific specialties, you do need research. For orthopedic surgery, for neurosurgery, you do need research, but you don't need to have every single one of these things. If you don't have a project that you're on right now, don't worry about it. Something may present itself at some point, and then you'll jump on that opportunity. You got to take one thing at a time, and don't try to feel like you got to do it all at once.
Really well said, Jake. Very, very, very good. Let's switch gears here now. We've got a launch today. Lana, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, 1 second. Let me share my screen. This is always gotta remind myself how to do this.
I might have to
okay.
stop.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That worked. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here I am on the new Cram Fighter page through Blueprint, and I'm just going to run through a quick demonstration of how to use it. This is how quickly you can set up your schedule. So for example, I want to study for a standardized exam.
If I could just interrupt for 1 second, Lana, what exactly is Cram Fighter and how could it help us?
Well, easily put, is a highly sophisticated planner. That's how I see it. It helps me set the dates of when I want to start and when I want to finish studying at a certain time frame, and then I can put the resources that I have and put it into the program, and it will divvy up the load evenly across those days that I wanted to, so that me, a very type A personality, can go to sleep in peace, knowing that I have done my portion, and once I'm finished with it, I know that I will be finished with all of the resources, as long as I finish every day, like the plan that I had set up for me, every daily plan. That makes sense. Okay, sorry. Well, shall we begin? So I want to study for a standardized exam. This is the school that I go to, and this is when I graduate. Simple. Then, for example, let's just do a USMLE step 1, and that is what I'm studying for. My exam would be 6 months away. This is just for the simplicity. In reality, I'd like to take it probably at the end of June, but for this demonstration. So let's say I want to start studying today. and I would like to finish maybe a week before my exam, just so that I can have time to read the high yield sheet, which I can, if anybody has questions about that, I can explain. Okay, so then we continue. So I love this feature, the resource bundles, because if you are uncertain of what resources to use, and I know a lot of you asked that question in the group chat, you can literally just click on, say, the most used resources, top 4, most popular, are Boards and Beyond, Sketchy, UWorld, and First Aid. So once you selected those, actually, let me add Amboss to that too. I like Amboss. They actually have a free exam, practice exam in February that you can sign up for. Usually you have to buy practice exams, so it's kind of nice. So then you have your resources selected. What's cool about this is that me personally, once you've been like through your first year of medical school, you realize that people talk too slow. And you can actually change the speed at which you listen, at which you watch the video. So that's pretty neat feature. That way it can account for that. I'll just leave it at 1 here. And let's bring down the UWorld questions to like 10, since I have put Emboss there. So now that we have selected our resources, perfect. There we go. And we're going to do, next over here. My goodness, hold on a second. Let me just, can everyone still see my screen? Just by the way, they have a lot more resources there. Sorry, I have to scroll down to see the continue. Okay, confirming that this is the settings. That was it, literally, that was it. And your schedule is made for you. The thing is that you can go back here into edit your schedule and you can adjust the settings. So this is pretty cool. Excuse me. You can select the days that you want off, that you don't want to study. For example, usually I have like every other Friday I'll have off or something like that. You can also do a single day off or vacation days like Easter. A lot of people celebrate Easter. You will select that into, you would put that day in there, and it's guaranteed that you will not be studying that day. You can have Ketchup Days. Now this is kind of new, and I thought this is absolutely genius. So for my school, we have 2 exams per week, and they're usually on Tuesdays and Fridays. So here I could adjust the load, and I can make like a light workload, or make a heavy workload when I'm on a Friday nights. You know, depending on when you want to take your evening off, and obviously don't forget to hang out with your friends and do some things for your mental well-being. And then once you adjust the schedule, you can rebalance it, and it will do these things for you. You don't have to think much about it. It's nice that it gives you these options so that when it rebalances things for you, like remember I had Thursdays off there on the schedule. There's no task to do that day. Just really quickly, if I go back to edit the schedule, and few features that I wanted to share with you is you can sort things by subject or system, which is also very neat because my school goes by blocks. And so I have reviewed a lot of like Boards and Beyond's videos already. And I can readjust this by dragging these systems into a certain order that would fit my schedule. And I thought that was very cool, very individualized. So it's not like it's a cookie cutter. It is personalized to what you're doing. You can change your pace, how many questions you want to do per hour, how many pages, based on what fits you. And lastly, you can always go back and add more resources or take them away if it's too many, if you feel like you have definitely put too much on your plate, because this is 6 hours per day, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So I really like this personally, and it has made my life a lot easier. Yep. And does anyone have questions, or did you want to add anything before I stop sharing my screen?
Lana, question for you. I've seen a lot of different questions in the chat here about people really excited about some of these features that you're showing them. When does this launch, and when can people start using these kinds of things?
Oh, the launch is really soon. To be launched this yet? I'm sorry. I
Yep,
have been
this is
on
live.
rotation. Yes, it's launched.
Fantastic. And I'm sure there's certainly technical support if people aren't seeing updated versions of this, or they may not have all the functionality. I'm sure you can reach out to people with Cram Fighter with under the bigger umbrella of Blueprint Prep, and they'd be sure to help you out with some of the technical components about making sure that you all who subscribe to it have all of those technical advancements and features available to you. So really, really super exciting development here. Thank you for sharing, Lana. I think that's awesome. Let me get us back to where we were, and I will continue to share my screen over here.
Fred, while you're pulling that up, I'll just mention a couple more things. So I used Cram Fighter, the OG Cram Fighter, back when I studied for Step 1 in 2000, whatever, 17, whatever it was. It was really helpful for me because it's so overwhelming when you, especially when it comes down to dedicated, you just want your schedule, and you want to be able to just look at your day and say, all right, these are my tasks for the day. And now you can do that with a pen and paper, like we've done for generations. The issue is, what happens when you miss a day? What happens when you want to make sure you were planning on studying for 6 hours, but you could only do 4.5? Cram Fighter has built in, especially this new version, has built in ways to basically adjust your schedule accordingly, because you're not going to be like a robot during this time. You're going to miss stuff, and it's okay. And this new version allows you to create your schedule quickly. I mean, y'all saw how quickly Lana did it. That was it. All she has to do now is follow it, and you can edit it, add in resources, delete resources. It's really essential to have a schedule that you can live by when it comes to dedicated, because you want your life to be, actually a lot of things I'm talking about are right there. And the data-driven resource recommendation, that second part there, provides you options to basically, it looks at what other people have been successful at using like a 3-month, 6-month, 6-week study period, and you could essentially tailor your schedule based off them. The main thing, if I could summarize Cram Fighter in one sentence, it reduces your stress. Reduces your stress, allows you to just focus on the studying and not the planning. Take that element out of it.
Really awesome job, and really terrific advancements with this. I also remember using Cram Fighter back when I took STEP in 2013. Back then, it was just an iPhone app. And it was incredibly awesome just to organize just the few resources that I was using, because I knew that I had an objective for the day, and I knew that I needed to get through it to feel like I accomplished something, and it was able to pan out everything I needed to do in a very reasonable amount of time. So really, really great tool. And remember, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about how doing well in this process simply requires an intelligent plan, not necessarily natural intelligence. And I think this really can help with that. So it comes back to really developing your mindset and what you're trying to do when you're preparing for this. We know that happy people who go to the hospital every day and happy people who practice medicine are the ones who are going to do it well. You really want to strive for that balance. You want to expect that there can be bumps in the road. I've always said, and something that I've learned from attendings of mine when I was in medical school, is ride the line. You're going to have a lot of highs. You're going to have a lot of lows in this career. It's better just to try to keep those emotions tempered. Go in every day with the optimism of doing well. Realize that there's going to be low moments, but don't allow yourself to flounder for too long, and don't allow yourself to lose a sense of modesty or being humble as you go through this process, because the closer you fly to the sun, the more likely your wings are going to melt. Remember the Maslow pyramid for what we all need: feast and famine. It lives in sleep. You need to be quite well rested to do this well. Be connected to other people. This is a fundamental issue with human nature. People love you, you love people. Connect to them, realize that we can all suffer together, because that's basically what medical school is. And you can confide in these people and have trust in them. Biological imperatives: you have to sleep, you have to take breaks, you have to work out, you have to do the things that make you whole. Do not lose yourself to this process. And move thyself. We said know thyself before. Know how you learn how you learn. Get up away from your computer every once in a while and go for a run or a walk or something. You will find you will return far more rested and far better equipped. When it comes to managing test taking anxiety, which I know a lot of people have in this game, realize number one, that you've gotten to this point because you're actually quite good at taking tests. You've been doing this for a long time. If you're in clerkships right now, if you've maybe already done step one, if you're in medical school or just beginning it, you've already done a tremendous amount of test taking and you're probably pretty damn good at it. So have that confidence. Know that you're getting better at this. This is a muscle that you're working out, and it's getting stronger the more you prepare for it. It comes with intelligent planning. Create a schedule and stick to it. If you don't feel very confident in your ability to do that, we've got great resources that do that for you, as was just previously shown. Make time for you to rest and relax and recharge, because we said before, happy and rested people do the best work. And then recreate those test taking scenarios to make it familiar for yourself. You don't want to go into this with a surprise. You want to go in believing that your test day is the easiest preparation or the easiest moment in your entire preparation course. As we said before, keep reaching across, find those people who get it, find those people who can help you, whether that be a tutor through our MST division. I mean, man, I'll talk to Faith after this, but I must have been studying for step one for the past 10 years because it feels like that sometimes, because I keep reading first aid over and over again. You want to break up those timing questions, get up, move around, allow yourself a mental break, and be reflective, be honest with yourself, really be critical of the things that you don't know and hold yourself accountable to those shortcomings. And when it comes to things to avoid, definitely don't overload yourself with resources. There's far too many out there. And it goes back to what we were saying before. Everything that exists is simply derivative of first aid made over 30 years ago. And do not compare yourself to other people. That is something that we frequently do. Know how you do well. Continue on that path toward your own self-confidence. And you really want to focus on active learning. Avoid falling into the gap that is passive learning. Passive learning is when you have that Boards and Beyond video on and you feel like you're learning because it's playing, but you're not actually paying attention to it. Let's be honest with ourselves. Learning isn't happening in that moment. Really hold yourself accountable. If you find yourself zoning out, pause the video, get up, do something different for yourself, come back recharged, and really hit it the way you're supposed to. Jink and Lana, some thoughts on some of these anxiety strategies?
Yeah, it's normal to be really anxious about step one, step two, all this stuff. I mean, med school is just one giant anxiety, 4 years of anxiety, sometimes 5 years, however long your med school is. It's just a bunch of anxiety. And no one ever talks about that. No one ever talks about the breakdowns and everything like that. Just know that it happens all the time. I cried multiple times studying for step one. There's only so much that you can do. And I think just recognize that even if you do it all right and you're using the right resources for you and you're doing your schedule the way you're supposed to and everything like that, it's okay to have major breakdowns and feel like inadequate. And that happens to everybody. People just don't talk about it. I punched a wall 2 weeks before step one, almost broke my fist. I'm not saying that, I'm not encouraging that behavior, but that, it's normal to get really freaked out about this stuff. And finding someone that you could talk to about all of this, whether it's a friend who's taking step one, whether it's a therapist, whether it's your mom, dad, brother, sister, it's really important.
I agree. And just doing things that you love, don't forget to do that. Reminding yourself why you're here, I think, is very important. And when you, at least from what I've heard and just from my own experiences, when you feel low, just focus on the end goal.
Well said. Absolutely agree. It's all about what you're here to do, the bigger picture. Keep what you are looking for in mind, and you'd be surprised what you're capable of. Realize that there's going to be some curves in the road. There's going to be things that you encounter that you weren't necessarily anticipating, but it's okay. Plan for the worst, have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan Z. Have people who can hold you accountable. It's better to go through this with people than it is alone. all of medical education. I'm not just talking about step exams. I'm talking about this whole process of what it is to go through medical school, through residency, even in your early careers. This is going to be incredibly important to have people who just get it around you and people who can hold you accountable to bring out the best habits in yourself. And then also know what you need to do to get back on the horse when you get thrown off of it. Know what to do when it comes to mitigating your stress, having those healthy relationships. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Make sure that you know what you need to do to come into work every day strong, positive, optimistic, and being the best version of yourself. When it comes to pre-dedicated study tips for the exams, we're just going to kind of rehash some of these summaries here, and then we'll jump to our live Q&A. So definitely stick around. But you want to develop good self-care habits, build long-term retention study strategies. Anki is there because Anki is really great with spaced repetition. I know a lot of people probably use some of these massive decks, and if you are somebody who has done historically well with them, then I commend you. Me personally, I could never go through 30,000 flashcards of anything. It sounds like well, it sounds like hell. I'm going to be honest with you, but I think that if you learn that way and it works for you, then you should do it. And if you have not started something like Anki yet and have never used it, don't start. Use what worked for you instead. Dabble in those key resources that work for you. As I've just said, a few weeks before dedicated, you want to set out that study plan, maybe have a few hypothetical Cram Fighter schedules to see which one seems most amenable. And then take some responsibility in minimizing some of the things that you might feel like you have to do, or call your family and friends and say, hey, I'm about to go into a cave for a little while. Okay, I'll be peripherally available, but I'm not going to be around to do stuff all the time for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So I need you to respect that. And if I don't respond to text, I'm okay. I'm just doing this because I need to study for it. It's okay to do that. People who love you will understand. Ask for help when you need these kinds of things. Stay grounded, know yourself, and remember the big picture of why you're all doing this. You can't know everything. You can give yourself a little bit of grace, but you should still strive to be able to perform as great as you possibly can on these, because you know that you have the ability to do this. And when studying for these exams, you give yourself some slack. You're not going to be an expert at this right away. It will take some time. You're not going to be the fastest person when it comes to reviewing some of the UWorld questions, because you might say, my God, 40 questions is taking me like 4 hours to review. That's okay in the beginning. You will get faster at that. Stay positive. You will change your study habits. You must change your study habits. Adapt to the challenges that are rising, and you should rise to meet them as well. You will get better at this. It is a muscle. You work it out, things will get easier. And remember what you can control and what you can't control. Give it to the universe if you have to, if you feel like you can't do it, but just remember that you're doing everything in your power to do excellent in this course of your education, and you all have the potential to do phenomenal. Any other words of advice, Lana or Jake, before we jump into our Q&A?
It's a short-term sacrifice for a long-term reward. You won't look back and regret the times you spent studying. I never look back and regret it. It got me where I'm at now. It's a really, really, really crappy time. I'm talking about dedicated. Med school overall was pretty crappy, but dedicated itself was exceptionally horrible. But it is a time in your life where you have to be more selfish than ever before. And I don't mean selfish in like the negative connotation, but like you gotta, it's about you in those 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is. Like Fred said, text your family members, let them know, text your friends, you're here. There, texts of support would be great, but you're here, you're grinding, your phone's on airplane mode for most of the day. You get off Instagram, get off the things that distract you, while making sure that you have the things that keep you mentally well, and you get through it. It's a rite of passage that is really hard, y'all. It's really hard, but you'll get through it. I swear you'll get through it, and you'll look back on the other side and be so happy that you put in all the work.
Fantastic advice. We've got this launch party here for these new advances in Cram Fighter technology to help organize your studying as best as possible and to get you the scores and the performance that you hope. Let the computers do the things that you don't have the time to be bothered with. Let AI do what it is meant to do and take away the boring parts of our lives and make that part the autonomous part. We are giving away 5-6-month subscriptions to the new Cram Fighter. Use this promo code launch25 to get 25% off of this study planner. It's by Blueprint Test Prep. It is a phenomenal tool. If you are unfamiliar with it, give it a shot. I liked it in its extremely early form. I know Jake endorses it as well. And Lana is a super genius about it because she knows all the new features and everything. With that said, let's jump into this question and answer. If you have important questions that you want that we did not quite get to, enter them into the Q&A section. I actually find this to be a bit more easy to follow than the chat because that can happen quite fast. Send them over and I will defer to Jake and Lana. Just go ahead and read some questions out and answer them. And you can throw them around, or if you want to jump to a new question, I'm not going to stop you from doing that.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to answer this one. I've heard clerkship grades can be quite subjective. Do you think residencies will take this into account? From my experience, every school does things differently. Imagine that in my school, there was like a good, a excellent, and honors, right? I'd say I split my grades between honors and excellence, but I got a good, which is the worst grade you can get. I got a good in internal medicine, probably a really important specialty, right? Like a pretty important rotation. I don't know what the hell happened. I can go over it a million times. I fought the grade, whatever. I got the worst grade you can get. I still matched my #1 residency. Out of my 24 interviews, one program brought it up. A program I didn't want to go to anyway. They were really like pompous, whatever. I'm obviously not going to mention who they were, but they brought it up. So, 1 out of 24, those are the odds. And I got the worst grade possible for a rotation. So, if I got 10 of those, 5 of those, that's a different story. But you can afford to get a bad grade on a clerkship rotation. And if they bring it up, be prepared to discuss what you learned from it and how you will improve and how you've improved from it.
Yeah, I agree. I actually I'm not in clinical rotations yet, but I get those questions all the time because I'm part of a national society, honor society, and I'm the president. And so there's certain stipulations that you must keep in order to remain in that society. And so talking to the dean about these things and about getting the process like pass, high pass, and honors. And you can only get like 1 pass to stay in it. The thing is, you're going to get preceptors that are they're just so done being preceptors. Unfortunately, people get tired. And people like presidencies should hopefully understand that. And like you said, be prepared to explain or have some sort of reasoning for it. Unless you have multiple passes, then it's kind of a red flag, but one or two with a good explanation should be okay. I saw a question in the chat about stopping extracurricular activities and research during your dedicated time. And although I'm not there yet, I would suggest keeping one thing, like not have your full plate of things, but having something to take your mind off of constant studying. I don't see how that would harm you as long as it doesn't take too much time. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I will provide an alternate opinion on that. I will say that your dedicated study time is a very limited and very temporary moment in your entire life, and especially in your medical career. It is a less than 1% time of study for anything that you expect to do well in this course. Let yourself jump into this wholeheartedly. It's 8 weeks. You could do anything for 8 weeks. You can train for a marathon in 8 weeks. You could climb a mountain in 8 weeks, less than. You can be the top scorer in any exam if you had 8 dedicated weeks of study to do it. And if you focus all of your time and energy on that, I guarantee you'll be extremely happy with the results. The other thing that I'll say as well is that sometimes, and if you're like me, because I'm very guilty of doing this and I know myself, that's a theme throughout tonight's webinar, is that if I have something else on my to-do list, I am more likely to avoid the thing I know I have to do at the excuse of knowing that, oh, well, you know, I have to do this other thing and I have to do it. So don't let an extracurricular activity stay on your schedule if it's going to be an excuse to keep you from doing the things that you know you need to do, especially if it winds up being a standardized test like this. And by going forward, if you wind up saying, well, you know, I didn't score the way I wanted to because I had this other responsibility, well, whose fault is that? I say commit yourself wholeheartedly to this for a very short period of time, and you will be very pleased with the results.
Yeah,
I think I want to take your advice.
I'll add something there. There is never a time in your training where you should go all out for. This is the time. This is the time. I took out a heavier loan that year. You know, I can't pay for med school. You know, everything is through loans. I was eating Whole Foods, amazing pre-made meals every night of dedicated. I normally could never afford that, but there's ever a time to treat yourself, to put everything else. Like, I'm not cooking during that time. Absolutely not. If I could afford to hire a chef, I would have. But everything during those 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is you're all in. You're all in. And if your, you know, extracurricular is playing soccer and that is really important to you, do it. But maybe if instead of a 2-hour game, do a half hour and get back. Make sure you spend, you know, make sure you do one thing for yourself a day to allow yourself to have a sanity during this. But, you know, pull out all the stops, everything you got during those 8 weeks. I remember I bought like 40 cases of LaCroix, like 40 cases of every flavor possible. I didn't drink water for the 8 weeks. I was on LaCroix only. Could I afford it? No, but I was treating myself because it was the hardest time, really the hardest time in medical school. And I wanted to make sure my life was bearable.
Let's talk about a few UWorld strategies, because I see a bunch of different questions here about how to use it optimally. And I'm going to try to group them into one answer here so I can try to answer all of your questions. UWorld is a beast. It's got thousands of questions in it, divided by a ton of different subspecialties that you're going to go into. And one of the more common questions I get is, as having tutored this, is, you know, how do I start? Should I just do them random because that's the way the test is going to present it to me? Or should I have some sort of a rationale or a logic behind how I do it? Oftentimes, I recommend that I think about step one studying. I'll use this as an example in terms of a 3-phase approach. If you're going to take 8 weeks to prepare for step one, my recommendation is thinking about a phase one term of about maybe being 4 to 5 weeks. It allows you a time of a slowest amount of review, the longest amount of time to say make it through a first aid book or something like that, and an opportunity for you to really to do things in a subject-based and organized fashion, where you're hitting chapters in first aid or whatever kind of review book you want to go through, and you're hitting like-minded questions, subject-based in UWorld at that same time. You're doing a one-to-one. You're reading about endocrine and you're testing yourself on endocrine. And you may not cover everything in endocrine during that session of reading that you may get questions on, but at least it's in the same track mind of thinking. By the time you finish your phase one of studying, ideally, you want to have covered the breadth of everything on the exam once through. Phase two comes along and being a little bit shorter, maybe the next 2 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks, which brings us to weeks, say 5 to 7. This is a little bit more of an abbreviated review with the intention of seeing everything a second time. The stuff you know extremely well are the things that you spend the least amount of time on, and the stuff that you found that you completely forgot or don't know nearly as well as you feel you should by week 5, 6, or 7 is the stuff you go back and read a little bit more into detail. If you've mastered heart failure or cardiomyopathy or that 1 or 2 pages in first aid, and you've aced every single question based on UWorld from it, there's no real need for you to go back over it in any depth again, because you're acing it. You're going through it. I would say read the page in first aid, acknowledge that you know it quite well, and move on. It should take a process of about maybe 45 seconds for you to do that. Things that you might know or not know very well, say like hyperparathyroidism or thinking about calcium phosphate homeostasis. If that is challenging for you by week 5, 6, or 7, that's the thing you might want to spend another 20 minutes reviewing, another 30 minutes reviewing, sometimes maybe even another hour reviewing if you need to go back through a video or hitting this again. But know at that point what you are strong and what you are weak in, and be able to tackle those. Phase 2 UWorld should be done in a way that might be a bit more randomized at this point. You've seen everything under the sun when it comes to material during phase 1. Now we can start tackling questions in a bit more of a random fashion to simulate the exam. As you approach phase 3, which is arguably the last phase of your exam, at this point, burnout level is high. You're tired of reading first aid. You're tired of going through this material. You're tired of doing UWorld questions for that amount. Now is the time where you're really trying to get into the endurance mode to get you past the finish line. This is the time in the very last week of your preparation where UWorld is allowed to become that test tool, where you're allowed to simulate an exam, where you're allowed to take NBME practice tests, where you're allowed to really just quiz yourself on the information. First aid becomes a thing of the past. Reading becomes a thing of the past in that final week. You are preparing for questions. You are understanding why you got questions correct or incorrect. This is the time during UWorld prep where you go through the flagged questions or the incorrect questions and really kind of master that material that you might need to see one last time to make sure that you've truly got it. I endorse all of my students to do UWorld in timed mode from day 1 of studying to the end of their studying. It gives you absolutely no benefit to do them in a untimed mode. I also recommend that you can stay away from tutor mode in my mind. I think that there's no better time to prepare for the pace of the test than on day 1 of studying. So set up a block of subject-based questions, say an endocrine or cardiology or whatever it is. Focus on that 10 to 20 block or 40 block, however you want to set it up, whatever your Cram Fighter is allowing you or whatever you're doing. And then take the time to go and review them. How should you review UWorld? Well, if it's 60 minutes to do one block of 40 questions in UWorld, it ideally will be the goal of you by the time you get to the end of your studying to review in a 2-to-1 ratio. That means 2 hours of review for every 1 hour of testing. That is an aspirational goal. That is difficult to master in the very beginning. In the beginning, I expect my students to be somewhere around 4 hours of review for every 1 hour of 40 blocks. But again, it's a muscle. As you practice, you will get faster and faster, and knowing about what in those explanations is most crucial for you to know versus ones where you can say, hey, that was a great fact, I'm moving on now. And you will become more astute as to know what those kinds of things are. Light bulb moments are things inside of UWorld explanations that really have connected the wires here. They've really kind of created a new synapse and got you totally motivated to be like, wow, I totally understand why this works now, right? I never really realized that before, and this totally links a concept for me. Those are the things I recommend maybe jotting down in what I call a UWorld journal. So one thing I really liked about first aid was something that you could just kind of jot these little light bulb moments down in their respective areas so that you augmented your first aid to be your personal tool, something that could change over time to really reflect how your brain was working to synthesize the information. Jake, you've been through this very recently. What kind of strategies work for you?
Yeah, I like a lot of the things you said. I agree with. I personally do tutor mode up until it's a couple months before game time. In the early, so like I'm studying for step 3 right now. My date on my calendar is April 20th and 21st, right? So it's January now. I'm a couple months out. I'm getting my feet wet. In February, I start doing timed. I start ramping it up. And I start by doing just 10 questions, 5 to 10 questions a day. And by the way, y'all, 10 questions a day, especially when you're like in your first year or you're months out from step, 10 questions a day is awesome. Like, don't get into this state of mind where it's like, you've got to crush 20, 30 questions a day, despite what people say. Even 5 questions, you get 5 questions done in a day when you're, months out from step and you're in class for 8 hours a day. That's amazing. It's just about kind of getting started and then ramping it up. And I think another thing that don't get caught in the weeds of like, oh, I got to do a second pass. I heard of people doing third passes. I never got to the second pass. I never got there. for step 2, I think I barely finished my first pass. It's really difficult, and like Cram Fighter helps, and accountability partners help, but you can only do what you can do. And I think so many people talk about questions nonstop. Oh, I did a 20 block tonight. Well, that's for me, that's 2 hours. That's a lot. And I might not have that time. But yeah, you nailed it. I mean, pace yourself. And, the goal is to finish U World and retain as much as you can. Let's go 5 minutes. Okay.
Looking through some of these other questions real quick.
Let's do 5 more minutes. So maybe we just answer maybe 1 or 2 more questions. There's one here I want to address related to residency applications, because at some point, all these tests are really important, but then it's going to come down to applying to residency. And someone here said, I feel like beyond studying, any extra time I have to maintain my physical, mental, and spiritual health, exercising, getting sleep, journaling, is what they spend their time doing to prevent burnout. And they're wondering how competitive they'll be for residency programs, given that. I'd say there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You're better off doing that than you are trying to do it all, burning out and hating your life every day. But is there a way to make what you do to prevent burnout? You mentioned exercising, mental health, spiritual health. Is there a way for you to make that a sort of hobby to talk about in your application? Maybe it's meditation, maybe it's yoga, maybe you become a yoga instructor. Maybe you do a little bit of research, you find a research project on sleep. Is there a way to make what you enjoy doing a way to make yourself unique on your application? That's what I would try to do if I were you. And even if you can't do it, and you're a student who does the steps and volunteers 1 or 2 places, you can still match into residency. It's not like you have to do everything, but you want to do everything you can, so that when it comes down to application season, you can say to yourself, you gave it your best shot and you kept your mental health where it needed to be. It's all about balance.
Very well put, Jay. Any other last minute questions that we can answer here before wrapping up? A lot of these questions, quite excellent, very much specific to many individuals. And I would advocate that if you have specific questions about coming up with a strategy, really talking to one of these experts at MST, at Blueprint, who really have done this before and have been doing this for years, like myself or some of my colleagues who I know have tremendous experience in this. We are happy to do several things. We can tutor throughout your entire dedicated. We can get you through medical school if that's what you're looking for. We can just sit for a one-on-one and meet very sporadically and talk about strategy and things that are going on. We are your cheerleaders. We can be psychologists. We can be dads or moms. We can be accountability buddies. We can be whatever you need to succeed in this, if you feel like those kinds of resources are of benefit. So reach out. We are available. You can check out our website, through Blueprint. We are happy to lend those services. So many excellent questions here, really good to answer, but very much strategy specific. So we offer these services. Please don't hesitate to ask. And even just talking to somebody at the office doesn't really cost a dime, except for some of your time, to figure out how we can best get you connected with the people who can help the most. So definitely reach out if you do have any of those questions. Any last minute heated questions that you guys see before we wrap up?
No, this has been great. Y'all asked incredible questions. Everyone that came here is, super dedicated, and you're gonna make it happen. I promise you. It sounds, you got massive imposter syndrome in med school. I had it too. You feel like everyone else is smarter than you, works harder than you, but you're all here for a reason. No one gets into med school without being super dedicated and hardworking, and y'all are gonna crush it.
If I might add last thing is, once you do go on rotations, I know we're all striving to be the best, but don't be the gunner. I think I've heard stories of people that they would tell a student, "Oh, the resident's looking for you," and they would grab their surgery spot. Don't be that person. Once you get there, just be kind to everyone. We're a team. showed that you can work with other people, and that will make you stand out. That will make you a good leader if you will help raise other people up with you, not by stepping on their shoulders. So one piece of advice, I guess.
Absolutely. Remember that doing anything worth doing is going to be hard. So do it well. And if you're going to do it well. You all were terrific for listening to us tonight. We were so excited to talk to you, and we still are. Reach out to us if you have questions, get in touch with our teams. We love what we do. We are dedicated to medical education, and we do this because we were you. We are your colleagues. We know what this is like. We hope to see you in the halls of the hospital someday. Have a wonderful night, everyone.